when you had asked me if I want to do yours, I was actually really excited about it.
It's been a long time coming. The tide is turning. We tired of running. We rising up. It's been a long time coming. They pride is hurting. Shake off that burden and that dirt in. Bounce.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of Raj Nation Innovations Discover Your Inner Awesome podcast. My name is Rajiv Nathan, aka The Raj Nation. I am your show's host. I am the founder of Raj Nation Innovation. I am a hip-hop artist. I am a yoga instructor. Above all else, I am a storyteller. I am joined by my co-host, Victoria Cohen, aka VC Money. Victoria is the voice behind Almonds and Asana. She is a yoga instructor, a blogger, a health, wellness, and fitness enthusiast. Above all else, she is an activist. This is Discover Your Inner Awesome, the only show where you get to eavesdrop on conversations with entrepreneurs, startup founders, artists, and musicians about the stories, the journeys, the struggles, but most importantly, the questions. The questions that help creative thinkers like you and I better understand who we are, what we're doing, and how we can do it better. This is Real Talk with real people doing real big things to show you the real side of success. In this episode, we sit down with Jarek Hamilton. Jarek is co-founder and CEO of on-demand photography service QikPix. With Jarek, we have a conversation near and dear to his heart, given his history, which you'll learn more about in just a moment. And the topic is, how do you silence your critics? Now, before we dive into that conversation, I want to extend an invitation to you. If you are not a member already, join our tribe by going to www.discoveryourinnerawesome.com. Enter your email address there on the homepage. You will never miss another episode of this show. An email in your inbox every single Monday letting you know when a new episode is out, so you can stay up to date with the awesome in our lives, and therefore stay up to date with the awesome in your life. All right, let's dive in now to our conversation with Jarek Hamilton of QikPix. How do you silence your critics? Let's listen in.
I think being able to look at, how we silence our critics it's important to me because I've faced a lot of that while trying to build, my companies and current company I started now. So I faced a lot of, laughter and kind of getting poked at like, haha, kid, great idea. We'll do this or something like that. I faced a lot of that, throughout my entire life. Even as far back as, being 6, 7 years old and selling magazines door to door. A lot of people, laugh at that type of stuff. And it's important to me because in today's society with all the technology that we have available, it's so much easier to get yourself out there and really push forward and try and do what you love in life. And I think that there's still a lot of people out there that don't understand that they have the ability nowadays more than ever to accomplish the goals that they want to achieve.
So can you go into some of like the specifics around how you said people are like, haha, kid, great idea. Any like specific story that comes to mind?
Yeah. So I think the most specific story that comes to mind is when I was 17, I was still in high school. I started a business where I basically refurbished ink and toner cartridges and sold them to major manufacturing companies here in the United States. And I started it when I was 17. And I had tremendous traction. I had about 5 multi-million-dollar manufacturing companies in and around the area I lived, which was Streator, Illinois. And they loved the fact that I could save them, tons of money on their toner cartridges that they just blow through. And I was purchasing them from overseas, empty, and then refilling them here. And I was selling them at I was selling them for $300. I only had, maybe $20 into the thing or $25 into the thing. And the particular story of when I first realized like, wow, this is going to be hard was when I went to a bank and I had revenue. We had we had profit. We were doing good. And up until that point, I was working out of a little room in my house. And I had went to the bank because I wanted to get, I think it was a small business loan. It was like 30 grand. And I even had a cosigner, and I had met with a couple of the banks, but I really got laughed at pretty seriously by some of these people. I mean, like right to my face. And they're like, yeah, that ain't going to work. And I'm like, what do you mean it's not going to work? Like, we're making money, hand over fist here. but I wasn't making enough. It was good money for being like 17 and trying to build this. And I had some support from the city, but I got no support in any other ways. And it was really upsetting to me. And I think I let it get to me. And I wound up closing the business down. I wound up stopping because I just felt like I had nowhere else to go. And it was at a time, before we had like YouTube was really huge and we had all of these different outlets to seek advice from and knowledge from. And I let that get to me. And I wish I wouldn't have, because the model that I had was really great. And I see businesses nowadays that are super successful in that area based off the exact same model that I had before I had noticed anybody else doing that. So I let that get to me a lot. And, that's kind of why silencing your critics is really important to me, because I let that get to me enough and I stopped my business because of it. So I hope to, help other people with that and understand that you don't have to let that happen.
How did, because that's pretty significant, right? That to the point where you're like, oh, okay, I guess I don't have a business here.
Yeah.
How did that make you feel?
It made me feel like I had almost failed when I didn't really fail. I was learning. I was learning about trying how to build a business, and I was only 17, and I was in a community that there was no fostering of entrepreneurship. It was still, you think nowadays, being an entrepreneur is really great, but even 10, 12 years ago, it was not a great thing to be an entrepreneur. It was basically like saying, I'm just going to try and figure out life. And it made me feel like I had failed. But in reality, I hadn't even gotten started. I was learning, and they made me feel like I wanted to quit.
Yeah. And I would say even still, entrepreneurship is a battle of trying to figure out life, but there's obviously a lot more education around it. Even in the Chicago area, like startups weren't a thing until like I graduated college in 2011, and I remember, I think like that was the year, like right after graduation, I remember hearing about 1871. Or maybe it hadn't even opened yet, but I remember there was like a startup weekend competition at a place called Tech Nexus, and I participated in that. And that was like the first, but prior to that, I don't remember hearing anything about startups. And even in a major metropolitan area like Chicago, it only recently has become a thing that like this is a type of way to live. There are companies that can be born. And a lot of it, I think, is due to the fact that there's just been a lot of technological advances in the last decade that have enabled, more businesses to start.
Of course.
Consequentially, more businesses are able to fail now, too.
Yes.
But giving more people a chance. Because, like you said, like 10, 12 years ago, YouTube, I remember, like became a thing around 2006, I think.
Yeah.
But it was just this like thing I had heard about, and I remember someone in high school, one of my friends, talking about how like, he worked at like a shoe store during summer, but like when there weren't customers in, he's like, oh, we'll just go behind the computer and watch all these YouTube videos. And I was like, what is YouTube? It was largely, even at that point, it was largely just people like taking their camera in their backyard and like running into a wall and
doing stupid stuff.
Yeah, doing stupid stuff.
I have a question on the question, just to even clarify, actually. So, are we saying how do you silence your critics in like how do you get people to stop being critical, or how do you silence it in your own head? Because I'm thinking it's how do you like not how do you take it seriously, not personally?
I think it's both.
Right?
Jarek, you tell me how you think of that question.
You know what? That's actually a great question. I did not think about the two sides of that aspect. So I think silencing your critics in your own head is about understanding where you're at and where you want to go, and understanding, understanding how you can move forward and just figuring out those ways. Because nowadays there's a plethora of different ways that you can move forward. I think silencing them, like silencing your critics, like the individuals that are telling you that, not in your head, but by your business, is by pushing forward and proving them wrong. And I think that's really that's really the biggest way that you can silence your critics, is really by proving them wrong and pushing forward. Now you got to look at the people that you're talking to too. So I've gotten very critical feedback on, even my business model and my company, that I started a year ago. And I didn't let that stop me. What I did is I took that information and I thought about it very hard and very heavily, and then I adapted and I moved forward. So yeah, there's really two ways of looking at that. Definitely two ways of looking at that.
Yeah.
Well, when I think about it, it's the external voices can become internalized if you hear enough of them and you hear them, if you hear enough quantity of them and you hear it enough times. And I know that's happened to me a lot over the years, where you start to confuse your own voice with the voices of other people.
You become a serious critic of yourself.
Yeah,
and then it's funny because like the first episode of this podcast ever 2.5 years ago with Matt Wilson, this came up as a topic of like, what are the voices in your head, and is that really you saying that, or is that your mom saying that, or is that like your neighbor who you talk to this about saying that? And it becomes very hard to distinguish with what's your voice versus the voices of others, particularly if there's not a balance of positive reinforcement or helpful reinforcement more than that.
Definitely. I think I'm my biggest critic. I think when I think about, who is a person that, criticizes me or my company or my business or anything the most, it's myself. And that works for me, and I don't know if that works for other people. I kind of adapted that role and just started thinking about, what I'm going to hear from other people, and I put that pressure on myself, and it helps propel me forward. Honestly, it helps me lean on the individuals around me and the resources around me, way more than I ever used to. And you need that in entrepreneurship. You need people around you. You need individuals to help you. I mean, Raj, when we were at Bunker Labs, I had several conversations with you, as well as I know many other people did, and they leaned on you for that expertise, and they could have done that because they had heard something from somebody else. Or I know some of the times when I lean on other people, it's because of what I put on myself to think outside the box, and I put some of them pressures on myself.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. I think you feel this and you get this on a daily basis, but you don't think about this question, like really think about it a lot. It's kind of trippy when you do. But I think that I'm the same way. Like I'm definitely my own biggest critic, and I think I end up like almost projecting, like making someone else's critique up of myself and then like putting that on myself, But it's interesting because it's so good to get feedback and it's so necessary. I think I'm not great at taking it and not taking it personally. And yeah, it's just interesting. But yet at the same time, like, I think I might also be my biggest critic. I don't know. So I'm not sure how I internalize that. It's weird.
I think everybody has their own different ways of internalizing it.
Totally.
The way I look at it is I hear both of you say, I am my own biggest critic. I think it's important actually to make a key differentiator or distinguishing fact here is that, or distinguishing statement rather, is that you're both saying you're your own biggest critic. I really think what you mean to say is you're your own biggest critiquer. Because there's a difference between critique and criticism.
Okay.
It's funny. Actually, this was a line in a song I made a few years ago. I rapped, there's a difference between critique and there's a difference between critique and criticism. Critiquing has a reason. The other means that you never listened. And that's the rhyme way to say it. To explain that further is the fact that if you were your own biggest critic, you would not be you would not be analyzing yourself with the intent of improving. You would be analyzing yourself with the intent of shutting yourself down. If you're your own biggest critiquer, I don't think you can be your own biggest critique, but your own biggest critiquer, you're analyzing yourself with the intent of improving and getting better and learning. Right? Critique is to learn. Criticism is to destroy, I believe.
That makes sense. I think you nailed that, Raj. I think we were saying that sentence wrong. That makes a little bit more sense when you pose it like that.
And this is where it starts to get difficult because, again, if you have too many voices of criticism in front of you, you can actually start to criticize yourself and say, "Oh, I'm not worth it. I shouldn't be doing this. Who am I to be doing this?" All that kind of stuff. Like, I think that imposter syndrome is something all of us have gone through at some point, if not still today, at some point before. But when you you have to pull in those people, like you were saying, Jarek, like, the Bunker Labs crew. When you're able to pull people in to have a conversation with them, and their only interest is in how do I just make sure this person is thinking about these things, so that they can be best prepared for what might lie ahead. Those are the types of conversations. It's not even necessarily like, how do I give this person advice? Because we've all gotten unsolicited advice before, and it is annoying. It's having the conversation with people who know, and this is really important to make sure you talk to the right people who have their own wits about them. They know their goal, or what they're not trying to do is make sure that they have to give you advice and see that you take their advice. Their goal is, how can I just let this person know what exists so that they can be best informed to decide on their own.
Yeah, that definitely sounds like how Bunker Labs is, and we all have those individuals around us, and we just gotta make sure that we're talking to the right people, like you had said, and make sure they do have their wits about them, and bump into people that don't necessarily understand what you're doing, and it could be hard, but it's definitely surrounding yourself with the right people as well.
With QikPix, so you talked about the bank with the previous business, the ink and toner business. With QikPix, what are some of the things people have said?
In the beginning, we had quite a few people that had told us that we're not going to attract the photographers, that it's going to be hard, it's going to be they're not going to like it, which a lot of them don't. I got yelled at yesterday a couple times, but that was one of the biggest things, is that we're not going to be able to draw on the photographers, because part of what we had done is change the way that the photographers handle their work and things like that, and it's actually been easier to get the photographers on board than it has almost getting customers to the platform. And I think that's because we really nailed what the problems were in this industry, and the photographers know that we understand what those pain points are for them, and that we're working as hard as we can to fix them. And so that was one of the biggest things that I had heard in the beginning. And it was a little bit distracting at first, because we hadn't brought any photographers to the platform in the beginning. It was, a WordPress landing page with a PayPal button. So it was, okay, well, we got people signing up, but we don't have other photographers actually using the system, vetting the system, telling us the pain points and the good things about it. And now that we have that, it's getting a lot better.
With some of these roadblocks that you mentioned, with getting photographers onto QikPix, and also having heard people say like, hey, you're not going to get photographers, did you fall into any sort of like downward emotional spiral that kind of just became its own self-fulfilling prophecy of, oh, people said we're not going to get photographers, we're not getting photographers, we can't get photographers, people said we're not going to get photographers, we're not getting like did that come into play?
I think for maybe a short period, yeah, it did. And then we really got creative with how we were trying to get photographers and get their opinions was primarily the biggest thing. What do you think about a platform like this? What would be the benefits? And then really trying to get as many of their opinions as possible is when we started actually getting photographers on board and signing up and becoming part of the platform. I think there was a little time there though, yeah, where I was a little bit, down and, I let it get in my head a little bit, but it's about moving past it and talking to the right individuals. And I had a lot of help in that area and a lot of suggestions. I mean, even, before we were talking about how we got the photographers in Chicago so quickly, the idea of using the thumbtack and doing that stuff wasn't even mine. It was Eddie's. And he gave it to me in New Orleans, and he was like, "Man, you should try Thumbtack." And I was like, "Never used Thumbtack. What's the value there? How what do you use it for?" And it's just a platform I hadn't used. He explained it to me, and then we got in that kind of like pinch position where we had shoots coming in, and I used Eddie's advice, and it worked tremendously. And then building on Eddie's advice, we started thinking of other ways. Okay, well, we use this. Now what else can we use to grow organically? And we reached out through some of them other platforms, and it just kind of took off from there.
So there's a concept I was gnawing on earlier today. And so, you can look at criticism, rejection, you can look at all of that in the same bucket. Risk, right? Because the reality is you don't get criticism unless you're doing something that's interesting, you know? No one badmouths the person who's not a YouTube sensation, right? Like only once you've done something that's interesting where people are either saying to themselves, oh, that could have been me, or who do they think they are to be doing this? Do you get people who start to, badmouth you? But all that said, the concept I was gnawing on earlier today was this idea that, like entrepreneurship, creativity, whatever you want to call it, like doing something that's different or doing something that's interesting, what it builds up is we've all heard of the concept of like risk tolerance and a risk profile. Mm-hmm. I actually think what it's doing on the back end is building your resilience profile. Because like you looked at like Jarek, you had that experience with the last business, right? And it did shut you down to the point where you actually shut down the business. But that was like, like you said, it was like a lesson learned. Mm-hmm. And then you get a little bit more resilient the next time. And then whether it's just like a small step forward with something, or then then you start QikPix and you get people being like, this isn't going to work. Well, 10 years prior, you might have said, shit, maybe it's not going to work. I don't need to do this. I can choose to not make life harder on myself. Okay, I won't do this. But your resilience profile gets built up from having those previous experiences and those previous rejections.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. So the business that we were just talking about when I was 17, that was the first business I had started. I started another business right out of the Navy when I got medically discharged from the Navy. My wife and I started an e-commerce business in Florida, and I had a business partner, and he made some bad decisions, and unfortunately it left me, my wife who was pregnant at the time, and our 2 children almost homeless. Like we were in food pantry lines, and like that was a breaking point. That was like the worst point in my life, like the lowest of the low you could feel after I had sank whatever we had into that business. And I told my wife at one point, I'm like, I'm done. Like I'm done. I'm never putting our family in that position again. But what it did is it made me think a lot harder. I guess I'm just an entrepreneur, and it's when you are an entrepreneur, it's not anything you can turn off. It's not like a switch that's on and off. I mean, that's just how you're built and how you're wired. So when the idea of QikPix came up, we worked a lot more together, the both of us, on what we were going to do and how we were going to go about things. And I told her at one point, not only do I never want to like start a business, I'm like, I'll never work with anybody again. Like even if I did start a business, I never have a partner or anything like that. I got more partners now than than I've ever had in my life.
Than fingers and toes.
Yeah, literally. I got like 6 different partners, they're all working with us. I think that's an exaggeration. I think we have like 4. But and I'll tell you what, I trust these guys with everything. I literally put my all my trust in these guys, and they put all their trust in me. And I didn't have that before in my other partnership, and I realize that now. So it definitely builds that resilience. I absolutely agree with you.
And I think it builds probably too, your resilience, but also your capacity to take those critics and what they say and like process them the right way and know which ones are like value add and which ones to like incorporate into what you're doing and which ones to be like, all right, great. Thanks.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. Like so like Raj and I did yoga teacher training together. And like a big part of it is getting feedback. Like each time you teach, during the program and even after, during like we did this apprentice program, you got feedback. And sometimes it was stuff that you agreed with. Other times you might hear it and be like, no, that's not true at all. And whether you're right or wrong, like what we talked a lot about in training is just to be like, okay, thank you. Like not to say anything back, really, not to like try to defend yourself, but just take it. If you like it, use it. If you don't. And probably the more and more that you get that, this sort of like resilience that we're talking about, you have a better judgment on what like valuable critics can add or, what you don't need to take from it.
Definitely. Yeah, you actually just made me think about a scenario just a year ago when we were at Collision as an alpha attendee. My wife, me, and 4 of our other people that were working with us, we all went to Collision, which is one of the largest tech conferences in the country and in the world. And we had went down there, excuse me. And we had our booth, we're set up, we'd been talking to investors, everything was going great until this photographer came up to us, and he had like the $9,000 camera around him, and he came up to us and he was like, "Oh, what's this?" And we kindly explained it to him what our concept was. We were still in market research phase. The product wasn't even launched or anything like that. And I was standing there, and he went to town on me in front of investors. I mean, in front of people standing around us. In the middle of this conference, he started screaming at me.
What did he say?
He was yelling at me like, you guys don't understand the photography industry. This is never going to work. Photographers are going to hate it. And how do you think that we're going to be? And at that point, we incrementally changed our price points to make sure that we were fitting the value proposition for the photographers and for the customers and for the company, right? So at that point, we were only charging like $60 an hour. And we knew that wasn't a fair value proposition, and we knew that we were going to change it, but we had to test it. And this guy just went to town like, "You're never going to get us money. You're never going to get us, business. You're the Uber of photography. You're trying to kill the industry. You're just trying to take it over." And he's yelling at us. And before I realized it, there were like 4 investors standing there. They have like these red badges on, so you know exactly who they are. There were like 4 investors there. There was like 20 people around us, and I'm getting screamed at by this photographer. And admittedly, I didn't handle it the right way. I immediately went on the defensive. I immediately tried protecting my team. I immediately tried protecting what I believed in. And I mean, I'd have to admit now, looking at it, I didn't handle that conversation the right way. I heard his feedback, but in my mind, while he was talking, I was already preparing a defense for myself and our business. And so my point is I looked at that. I realized I didn't handle that the right way, and getting to the point of saying, "Okay, thank you for that," instead of trying to defend yourself. I had a photographer reach out to me yesterday, and he called me on my cell phone because I gladly give out my number to anybody to tell them if they want to talk to me, they can, because I understand it is a disruptive business model and people do have questions, and we want them to know we care. So my phone number is out there, and this guy called me, and he was pissed, and he was a photographer. And he had me on the phone for 45 minutes yesterday telling me about the industry and this and everything that he could. And I listened, and I didn't really try to defend us. I told him I appreciated all of his feedback, and which I genuinely do appreciate the feedback. And there were even a couple things that throughout that conversation he had said that were actually really good. And it kind of got my gears turning. But not going on that defensive mode. If I would have went on that defensive mode, I wouldn't have really heard what he was saying. I would have just been trying to prepare my defense and argue with him. So that completely shifted for me over the past year. I actually take a lot more time to listen to what they have to say. And I do the thank you, and I appreciate that. And I pick and choose what I feel is best for us, and I even present that to the other people we work with and see how they feel about it.
The listening aspect of this, I'm glad that you guys both brought that up, because that's such an important piece. And I know, I'll tell you, doing this podcast for 2 years has made me such a better listener, because I used to be someone who would only listen to the extent to which I knew I would get to talk again. And halfway through someone talking, like you said, Jarek, whether it was good or bad, I would just start thinking about, all right, what do I want to say next? And then, doing this show for 2 years, at some point, I don't know when, I started to realize I'm actually listening all the way through to what they have to say, and then formulating my next statement as a response, not just as I thought of this, so I'm going to say it regardless. It's almost like, I've never taken improv classes, but this is the philosophy. It's like, you listen to what you don't go into improv with a script. You listen to what they said, and your only job is to add value to what they just said. And in order to do that, you have to listen entirely. You can't, they can't be talking. It's like, have you seen that episode of The Office where Michael Scott has like his like James Bond character or whatever in his improv class, and like no matter what everyone else is doing in the scene, he comes in as like this secret agent and just starts shooting everyone, and like they all hate him for it because it just ruins the entire scene. But that's kind of, that's the exaggerated comedic example. But that is how we need to start thinking about listening to other people and having these interactions is, what are they saying? First, what are they saying? What do they mean? And what am I going to do in response to that?
Yeah.
Makes a lot of sense.
and I loved too, Victoria, you brought up the yoga example. Like that was one of the best things that we did in that training was when we were told all you have to do with feedback is say thank you and move on.
Yep. And I wish I took that a little bit more into my personal life. My husband has literally told me on multiple occasions, you are not coachable, which is so funny. Sorry.
That's funny.
But which is so funny because he's my boss or something. I assume he must say that to his employees. No. But I get it. It's true. And it's something that I'm working on for sure. Taking feedback, criticism, critiques, however you want to call it. There's obviously so many different paths I can go down, and saying thank you and just doing with it what you please.
This too shall pass.
Yeah.
Yes.
Let's pause for a hot minute for this quick PSA. Are you part of the startup community? If so, keep listening. If not, go ahead and hit the skip ahead button because this is not going to apply to you. The Discover Your Inner Awesome podcast is a property of Raj Nation Innovation. What is Raj Nation Innovation? Well, it's simple. I talk to founders and startup teams every day who flat out tell me, hey, we suck at telling our story. I help remove the suck, combining a unique background of both branding expertise as well as songwriting expertise from my experience as a hip-hop artist. I take a performance lens and mindset to the world of business communication. Using this approach, I partner with growth-focused startups to help them develop their story, their go-to-market message, and their pitch so they can raise venture capital and acquire their early customers. Think of me like the Will Smith character Hitch, but for startups. And yes, I will tell you when you're dancing like an idiot. Does this sound like a conversation we should have? If so, head to www.rajnationinnovation.com. That's rajnationinnovation.com. Send me a message through there, and let's chat. Back now to the podcast. How do you think, Jarek, so we talked about the idea of building up a resilience profile from enough criticism, rejection, etc. You talked about how you're able to kind of deal with things a little bit better now, or I would say probably drastically better now. Do you find you're able to almost anticipate adverse situations now, or is it's happening and then you're saying, okay, what do I need to do as a result of this?
It depends. In some situations, like with photographers, within the first sentence or two, I can kind of understand whether or not they're going to be, a big critic of what we're doing. Other individuals, not so much. With the photographers, I'm getting better at it just because we're having more and more conversations with them.
And with those, so that's on the external side. Now then on the internal side, do you find with your own voice, do you find you're better able to anticipate when you're being too hard on yourself versus when it's helpful motivation? Because like we said before, you're your own biggest critic / critiquer. Are you able to tell, hey, I know I'm being hard on myself, but it's motivating versus I need to give myself a break?
Not really. I mean, in a sense, yeah, I understand when I'm getting too hard on myself in a sense, but to be honest with you, a lot of times is when my wife starts getting on me about, hey, you need to get this done. Then I'm like, okay, all right, I'm not just being too hard on myself. Somebody else sees it too. So I kind of use her for that balance, because sometimes I am too hard on myself and I just don't realize it. And, I'll ask her, what she thinks about it. And she's very honest with me. We're best friends. So it's good to have her there, and she helps me out a lot with that type of stuff. Or if I'm being too soft on myself, she's definitely there to let me know that too. So I reflect that off of her a lot more, because sometimes I don't understand when I'm being too hard on myself, and I'm like, no, you need to go to work. You need to get this done. You need to get this done. But there's only so many hours in a day. There's only so much you can do. So I use her to kind of balance that out a little bit.
And you do work like a dog. Some of the emails that I get, I'm like, man, why is he still up? Or how on earth did he respond to that within a minute?
Yeah, If you think I work hard, you should see some of these tech guys, man. They're in here until 3:00 in the morning, and back up and back in the morning.
Oh my God.
These guys are putting in some serious work. Yeah, you got to be available all the time, I guess.
Yeah.
I think we're called the always on generation.
Right.
Definitely. Intercom doesn't
amongst other things.
Amongst a lot of other things.
Yeah, we got a new help desk solution on our platform. I guess it's not new, but we're using Intercom, and now that we've implemented that and we're starting to get people asking questions all the time, I feel myself being on more. Like if I hear my phone ping, I'm at it even more because I know that that's probably a customer or a potential customer or a photographer asking a question. So I want to be like at the ready for that. Mm-hmm. So I'm a little bit on more now that the app is launched and things like that.
Yeah. Yeah. Victoria, I'm curious to know so you just launched your blog and your Instagram account. You're starting to like put a lot of content on there. Have you had anyone tell you like what are you doing?
Yeah, no, not yet. I don't think I'm like big. It's mostly family and friends who follow me that are really nice and supportive. No, I haven't gotten to that point, but I'm nervous about it. I am.
Yeah.
Especially when you're starting to put like yourself out there and personal things out there, and it is a little scary. I'm waiting for that to happen. Yeah. I haven't really yet, but for sure it'll come.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so interesting because, and I mentioned it before, but it's only the point at which you're doing something that's interesting do people feel a need to speak up.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a casualty of it, right? To be honest, I think the alternative scenario of living a life of irrelevance is worse. I'd rather be relevant to some people and have some people hate me for it than be irrelevant and everyone love me.
Yeah, I would agree with that. How have you had that, Raj? Have you faced those moments? I mean, you said that you've been doing this podcast now for a couple years. I've known you for probably about a year now.
Yeah.
How have you dealt with some of that stuff? Have you faced that with your podcast and things like that?
The podcast, not so much. Like as far as it being a thing. And that people are like, why are you doing this? More so with like the music side of me. I can't tell you in my past the number of, I'll tell you this, when I released my first mixtape at the end of college, I held like a little like quote unquote like release party at my apartment. And, I was like, okay, what's the best way to get this out? Provide people free beer in college, right?
That's pretty good.
But I mean, I had a friend like break the CD in half in my face, said, I'm never going to listen to this. And like, that was a friend,
What you mean?
Yeah.
That's not even.
And there's a lot, there's a lot of like build up to even like being comfortable putting music out in the first place. Cause leading up to that, I had a lot of people who would be like, oh, you suck. Like, well, you can't do this. Or the one that never made sense to me is, you're not black. Why are you rapping? So there's a lot. And then, it was like, I would say it took another couple of years to really get like comfortable saying with confidence, I am a rapper, and not have to worry about are people going to laugh at that or not. But what came with that buildup of confidence was I just started to change those circles I was running in, like I started hanging around a lot of other creative people who were doing their own interesting things, whether they were entrepreneurs, whether they were other musicians, whether they were artists or performers or whatever that might be. So then like what it transitioned to when I would, if I would brought up, I rap or I'm a rapper, instead of the, like, that's stupid, I'd get, where can I find your music? Wait, that's really interesting. Like, what do you rap about? And that becomes fulfilling at that point. But Jarek, it took a long, long time to get to that point, and a lot of I mean, like my album I put out 2 years ago was called Road to Redemption, and it was pretty much entirely about having to redeem myself in the face of criticism.
Wow. I didn't know that. I can definitely see how that would be something that you would face a lot of criticism. I like how, I mean, I'm just talking here. I like how you incorporate the raps and like the entrepreneur side of you too. Like, I mean, I heard you rap at like Bunker Labs, and it was like one of the coolest things I had seen out of somebody speaking about like real things that are going on. You're like, you're talking to us about building our businesses, and people are there dedicating so much time, and you just like threw in this rap for, I think it was at least like a minute and a half or something.
Yeah, something like
and
that.
we were all just like, what the hell was that? And now I like expect it from you. Like now I'm like, yeah, that's cool, because you incorporate it now. Or I don't know if you did before, but it shows in your personality is what I'm getting at, and it's really cool because you're definitely a unique individual with that, and it's a break up in the monotony type thing. Business, and it was awesome. I remember everybody thought it was hilarious. And I think even Justin was like, yeah, we're going to get Raj to rap again.
Yeah, it was funny because we were talking the other day, and he was like, maybe you should MC this, the upcoming pitch night, but you'd have to rap if you did that. And that's what's funny now, right? And like to kind of like put a cherry on that is now people are asking me to do things. They're like, but can you rap as part of it? You know?
Yeah.
And that's stuff that I feel good about, but I had to kind of bring it home. I had to build up that resilience profile.
Yeah, definitely. You don't bump into too many people that are just like, yeah, I'm a rapper. At least I don't. I don't know. Maybe I don't travel in that circle, but yeah, it's awesome.
All right, let's transition here for a minute and kind of learn more about QikPix as a company, as a service. Jarek, at face value, at surface level, it's a photography company. Where people can get photographers. Tell our listeners, though, why it's so much more than that.
Yeah, QikPix is much more than just a photography company because I think the individuals involved with it. And when I say that, I mean because we created QikPix. My wife and I built QikPix and founded it, not because we seen, like, oh my God, we want to start like an Uber company or anything like that. We started it because it was an important thing to my wife. She wanted to open a photography studio, and me having never give up on entrepreneurism, we looked at real problems that existed within the industry, and problems we felt really deeply about just because we were customers to the industry, because we have 4 children. We're always, taking photos. And it became something that was a lot more than just building, an app or anything. It became a part of us. And that's really what it is to everybody else now too, because we see people that are happy using the platform. We see people that, are excited to get their photos back and not be upsold, or just little things that mean something to other people. That's what means the most to us. We actually are solving a problem that exists. And photographers now are going through a tremendous phase in which they're failing at a much higher rate than they ever have. 85% of them fail within the first 3 years. The average median wage for a photographer is only $13 an hour. I mean, if we can change that, that's a powerful thing, and that's our goal.
Yeah. So can you talk a little bit more about, how you're bringing that change, and more so what I mean by that is how does the product work? I know Victoria knows that's how it works, but for our listeners who may not have heard of QikPix, how does it work, and what is it?
So QikPix is an on-demand photography service that allows customers to book a high-quality professional photographer in as little as 60 seconds and for only a fixed price of $99 per hour. We deliver all the photos back to our customer through our mobile app and web-based app within 24 hours after the completion of their shoot, and they then have the choice to choose which photos they want edited. So if we deliver 150 photos, or in Raj, your case, 500 photos from an hour photo shoot, the customer then has a choice to say, okay, I really love these photos. These are the ones I want to put on my wall. And then they can have them professionally edited through our service as well for only $1.50 per photo, and we return those back to you within 12 hours. So we looked at the industry as a whole, and we realized the pain points for photographers and customers, and we streamlined them. And we're really good at it because I have a lot of knowledge in lean and that type of processing, and how to look at, things from an outside perspective. And that's how we were really able to do it. And some of the other people that are trying to figure out the space haven't quite gotten to that point, and they're still trying to build mobile apps. Whereas QikPix isn't just a mobile app or a web-based app. It's actually a new industry. It's a new way for photographers to conduct business in an easier manner. and be able to stay in business. QikPix can help them get back to work and fill those gaps in their unbooked time, and stay profitable and give them that ease of access for customers and multiple experiences. Photographers are always looking for new experiences, and they can use our platform to showcase their work and get different experiences.
And on the customer side, I would love for you to share kind of that example that you and I have talked about before, where, like someone might be thinking right now, like, oh, I don't really do a whole lot of things that need to be photographed. But I when you and I have talked, I mean, you have a much different view on that, which I agree with.
Yeah. So the traditional sense is that, most people think, oh, I'm going to hire a photographer to do my family photos once a year. And it's, why limit yourself? Why limit yourself to capturing moments that are incredibly important to you just because the traditional thinking? And what we've seen is customers are able to use QikPix in multiple, in different ways. We had a gentleman that booked QikPix and then gifted the shoots to his kids. He knew that he didn't want to hire a photographer. He's an older guy and just loves to ride his Harley. He's not hiring a photographer for a whole lot, but he realized, like, oh wait, I want beautiful photos of my grandkids. They just got, they just got done having kids. They can't afford to buy a photographer or hire a professional. So he booked us and then gifted the shoots to his kids. So he made sure that he had those moments that were important to him in his life and theirs by utilizing our platform. And we haven't seen that before. And there's a lot of other utility to it as well. We've had people talk about, how you can, book for bachelor parties and, things like that. And you normally would not hire a photographer for a bachelor party. So we're starting to see a lot of different utility for the app, and it's a great thing. It's awesome. It's awesome to see people utilizing the platform in a way that they would have never expected, simply because of, conventional thinking. I'm just going to hire a photographer to do my family photos once a year, or my headshot, and that's it. We're seeing people have fun with it and get creative in how they could use QikPix to capture most moments that are important to them.
Yeah, and that's really, I think, one of the key things here is really starting to see, like if you could put a frame around more things in your life, I think you would. Like, a metaphorical frame around more things in your life, I think you would.
And I think we do. I think that's the culture and society we live in now. We post pictures of everything we eat and everything we do, and people want nice looking photos. So I totally see where the opportunity would be that, like, on a day out with your friends, suddenly you'd be like, hey, we should get a I mean, I could see it. People share their whole lives through photos on Instagram, on so many different platforms, that I could definitely see that becoming a thing.
And Jarek, can you, I really liked when you told me how you were talking to a person about how, like, let's say you want to take photos of, like, your kids or, like your baby or whatever like that. And the person's response was like, oh, my wife takes photos, of my child all the time. Like, what's the problem with that? And your response was, if you know where I'm going with this. Yeah. Can you share that?
Yeah, of course. So I ran into a situation where I was talking to somebody, and they had kind of like held up their phone a little bit, and they had said, I think this is going to be a real big competitor to you. And I asked the question, why? And they had said, well, my wife uses Instagram stories all the time, and I guess now they make little books and they'll send them to you digitally, or you can, I guess, have them printed, from what I had heard. But anyway, he said, we have a 9-month-old son or a daughter, I can't remember, and he said, we get all these neat little books back from Instagram, and it's awesome, and we love it, and this is what we use. And he held up this iPhone like 7, which they have remarkable quality. But I immediately looked at him and I was like, I heard exactly what you had to say, and I'm glad that you guys have those memories. I'm like, but what I really heard you say was that you have a 9-month-old kid and you and your wife don't have any professional photos of you with your baby. Mm-hmm. And he just looked at me and he was like, yeah, he's like, oh wow. Yeah, you're exactly right. And I was like, yes, technology today, has made us utilize, we utilize technology in different ways. And sometimes we don't even realize what we're doing. I mean, I didn't realize, but before we our last photos that me and my wife had done with our 4 children was through QikPix. I hired a QikPix photographer to do our family photos. Because I was busy and it's easy and it's convenient, not just because it's our app, but it was that easy. Before that, we hadn't had family photos in 3 years. I think it was like 3 or 4 years, if I'm not mistaken. My wife has tons of photos with me with my kids, or she has the selfie with her and my boys, and that was it. I was like, wow, technology has really made us stray away from certain things, and we hope to bring that back to people and help them understand, you don't have to let that happen. We're here to make sure it's as easy and convenient and affordable for you as possible, and to let you capture them moments. Yeah. Raj, you had a great tagline the other day. I sent you my pitch deck for our investor meetings, and you had a great tagline in there where you had said, you told us to change like our headline around. And I read the tagline, and I turned around and I looked at my partner, our CMO, and I believe the tagline was, it said, live in your moment and let us capture it.
Something like that. Yeah, I don't recall exactly what I said, but if I said it, it was good.
Yeah, it was something like that. And I turned around, I was like, wow, I was like, that's actually really good. I'm like, that's not meaning that's not good, but it was like, wow, yeah, because that is what we want people to do. We want people to live in the moments that they're experiencing life. And if it's that important of a moment to you, let us capture it. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about holding up your cell phone and missing your kid's birthday party. Instead of having the one photo of, your husband or your wife standing next to your child because you're taking the photo while they blow out the candles, hire us. Let us be there for that. Let both of you guys be standing next to your son or your daughter on that important day in their lives and that important day in yours. Let us be there for you. And it's a powerful thing. And I hope we can help more people, and I hope we can service more people and bring photographers more jobs.
Yeah, I agree. And I personally, to wrap it up, I personally, if everything goes well, I see a future where people are like, it becomes like a mental checklist of things that need to get done. It becomes like, all right, are we going to need a photographer for this? Yes or no? Like, hey, we're 4 buddies, we're golfing today. Should we get a photographer for the first few holes? Yeah, let's do it. Okay. That kind of thing is where I personally see what you guys are doing with QikPix, how embedded it can become into people's lives.
Exactly. We're hoping for the same, and we're working towards that every day as hard as we can.
So where can our listeners find QikPix online and or get in touch with you?
Yeah, so listeners can find QikPix. You can download it on either the Android or iOS platforms. It's spelled QikPix, or if you're using your laptop, it's QikPix, QikPix.io.
Perfect.
And sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I was going to say they can always reach me at my email address or through our help desk solution on the platform. And my email address is Jarek Hamilton, Jarek Hamilton at QikPix.io.
Awesome. All right, so then to wrap up, we will go one by one, giving our respective answers to today's question based on the conversation. Today's question was, how do you silence your critics? Victoria, how do you silence your critics?
Yeah, so based on what we talked about and thinking about it a little bit more, I don't know if I really think so much you can or should silence your critics, but I think that maybe you can start to control how much of it you internalize and like more what you do with it. I think no matter how big you ever become, you're always going to have some critics, and hopefully you could prove some people wrong. But I think it's more about how you like potentially silence it in your own head and don't internalize it too much.
My answer for how do you silence your critics, what I think about more and more as we were talking is something that I've always taught with my personal branding presentations, where we have a little section. I have a little section in that where I cover the idea of like impact and what impact are you trying to make. And I put this equation out where I say your impact is your action plus their reaction. You only have control over the first half of that equation. So your actions, no matter what you do, you cannot control how other people will react. But if you focus on your own actions, you can positively influence others' reactions. So I think if you focus on what you're doing, that's how you'll ultimately silence your critics. Jarek, how do you silence your critics?
I think that both of you guys like have that down. Victoria, you had said, figuring out how to not internalize it so much. And from our conversation, I think that's what I've pulled away. And then, I think that if you learn how to actually listen to people and not try and pose that argument all the time, and not internalize that frustration so much, I don't think you can ever get rid of them. I would have to agree. I don't think you can ever get rid of the critics. I think that you can just learn what you can control, Raj, to your point. You can only control one half of that equation.
Jarek Hamilton of QikPix, thank you so much for joining us.
Hey, thank you guys. It was definitely the best hour of my day, so I appreciate that.
Right on. It's always a pleasure to talk to you, man. We will catch up soon.
Thank you very much. Raj, Victoria, you guys have a great day.
That wrapped up our conversation with Jarek Hamilton. Jarek, thank you so much for joining us, and hopefully in the course of that episode, one more QikPix critic has been silenced. Did you, the listener, enjoy this episode? If so, the best compliment you can give us is a rating and review on iTunes. Ratings and reviews help more people find the show, therefore more people get to discover their inner awesome. While you're leaving that review, go ahead and subscribe to the show on iTunes or whatever other platform you listen to, whether it is SoundCloud, Stitcher, Google Play, or the various other podcasting platforms this show is available on. For full show notes, references, and resources, as well as Jarek's contact information, grab the full show notes at www.discoveryourinnerawesome.com. While you're there, go ahead and page through and have a listen to our 80-plus episode archives. That'll do it for this one. Thank you again to Jarek Hamilton for joining us. For Victoria Cohen, I am Raj Nation. You have been listening to the Discover Your Inner Awesome podcast. We will see you next time, but in the meantime, take care and be awesome today.
It's been a long time coming. The tide is turning. We tired of running. We rising up. It's been a long time coming.